Hi, good day, and welcome to the second part of our discussion on the writing of case study. Earlier on, we discussed the first two uh, parts of the case study research paper, particularly the introduction and the literature review. Today, I will talk about methodology and the discussion of the case. So let me start my discussion with with highlighting the importance of the methodology section of a case study report. So in this particular section of the case study report, you will explain why you selected a particular subject of analysis to study and the strategy you use to identify and ultimately decide that your case was appropriate. Okay? So it is in this particular section where you will need to justify the legitimacy of your paper, okay? And the way you describe the methods used varies depending on the type of subject of analysis that frames your case study. Okay, so the section on methodology, okay, will discuss, among others, the right or appropriate choice of methods, okay, depending on the type of the subject of analysis. Okay, so let's start with discussing what methodology may be required if your subject of analysis is an incident or an event. Okay, so let's begin with that. Okay, so in the social and behavioral sciences, okay, so the event or incident that represents the case to be studied is usually bounded by time and place. Okay, so with a clear beginning and end, and with an identifiable location or position relative to its surroundings. So the subject of analysis can be a rare or critical event, or it can focus on a typical or regular event. So just like what I have discussed with you in the class, okay, part of our conceptualization phase, the identification of any event or incident that is related to this time of pandemic, or it can also be a regular event, but is concerning, okay, a particular phenomenon. Okay, so the purpose of studying a rare event is to illuminate new ways of thinking about the broader research problem or to test a hypothesis. Okay? So just in case you decide to work on a case involving transition from this to that, or the migration of this process to a particular process in order to meet the requirements of the present situation, just like in the new normal, okay, we are hoping to know more about the dynamics or the event or the phenomenon itself. Okay, so this is for us to be enlightened on the a more broader research problem, or to simply test a hypothesis. So critical incident case studies must describe the method by which you identified the event and explain the process by which you determine the validity of this case to inform broader perspectives about the research problem or to reveal new findings. Okay, so however, the event does not have to be rare or uniquely significant to support new thinking about the research problem or to challenge an existing hypothesis. Don't take note about that. It doesn't have to be always a rare incident or an event. It can also be a regular or typical situation, but okay, may support new thinking or perspective, okay, about a research problem or even challenging, okay, an existing hypothesis. Okay, So we, for example, look into the indirect and direct economic benefits and costs of, say, for example, the uh, the of a particular online business. Okay, so we try to study, okay, what may be considered, okay, as, or sorry, not an online event, but a social entrepreneurship undertaking, in order for us to be able to identify what may be the direct and the indirect benefits. Okay, so the purpose of this study is to provide new insights, no, from measuring, okay, the impact of a social entrepreneurship project, okay, that prior studies, no, could not measure, especially on the local level. Okay, especially on the local level, no, because most of the studies are actually focused on large, or what is termed as mega events. Okay, so we try to also give highlight to what may be a community-based social enterprise, okay, in order for us to be able to have new and fresh insights about social entrepreneurship. So whether the event is rare or not, no, the methods section should include an explanation of the following characteristics of the event. Number one, when did it take place? Okay, so you will need to answer each of the following in order for you to give, okay, a clear picture of the case at hand. Number two, what were the underlying circumstances leading to the event? Basically, that's what the case study for. You will need to look into what are the factors, what are the conditions that led, okay, to the particular event. Okay, and lastly, what were the consequences of the event? What were the consequences of the event? Okay, so that's insofar as the case study where your subject of analysis is an incident or an event. It can also be a person. So the focus may be on a person. So if your subject of analysis is a person, explain why you selected this particular individual to be studied. Maybe it's a case involving a business tycoon, or a case of a local entrepreneur, okay, that have made it, no, in the national scene. Okay, it will be a case involving a rose from the ranks, so they say, no, case study. Okay, so explain why you selected this particular individual to be studied, and describe what experience he or she has had, no, that provides an opportunity to advance new understandings about the research problem. So like it started off as a community-based initiative, and then, okay, penetrating the national market. Okay, so mention any background about this person, no, which might help the reader understand the significance of his or her experiences that make them worthy of the study. Okay, so this includes describing the relationships this person has had with other people, institutions, and other events. So we look into how this individual, no, was able to address, okay, concerns like segmentation, how he in the process of segmentation has had established uh, partnership with some local as well as national suppliers, and how he was able to uh, to uh, lay down the foundations of 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 running his business, okay, on a wider scale. Okay. So this includes describing the relationships the person has had with other people, institutions, and or events that support using him or her as the subject for a case study research paper. So it is particularly important to differentiate, okay, the person as the subject of analysis from the others, and to succinctly explain how the person relates to examining the research problem. Okay, so that is if your subject of analysis is a person. Now, what about if your subject of analysis is a place? So in general, a case study that investigates a place suggests a subject of analysis that is unique or that is special in some way, that this uniqueness can be used to build new understanding or knowledge about the research problem. Again, the intention of any case study is to build new understanding, okay, or knowledge about the research problem, or test, okay, a hypothesis or a new hypothesis, or brings about new hypothesis. So a case study of a place must not only describe its various attributes relevant to the research problem, for example, physical, okay, socio-cultural, economic, political, and others. So, but you must state the method by which you determine that this place will illuminate new understandings about the research problem. Okay, so it is also important to articulate why a particular place as the case for study is being used if similar places also exist. That is, if you are studying patterns of homeless, for example, if you are studying patterns of the community where micro enterprises are established. Okay, so if applicable, we describe what type of human activity involving this place makes it a good choice to study. Like, for example, the case study of blacksmithing, okay, or blacksmith in Posorubio, for example, okay, and pottery somewhere in San Carlos City. Okay, so what makes it unique, what makes it relevant, okay, to your to the place, no, and the initiative. Okay, so that will be for the methodology involving place as a subject of analysis. Then we also have, if your subject of analysis is a phenomenon. Okay, so a phenomenon refers to a fact, occurrence, or circumstance that can be studied or observed, but with the cause or explanation to be in question. So phenomenon is something that the cause is in question, okay, or the occurrence of a phenomenon, okay, needs an explanation. So in this sense, a phenomenon that forms your subject of analysis can encompass anything that can be observed or presumed to exist, no, but is not fully understood. In the social and behavioral sciences, business administration including, the case study usually focuses on human interaction within a complex physical, social, economic, cultural, or political system. Okay, so the research problems or questions, could be how and by what means, this phenomenon exists. Okay, so a case study of a phenomenon most often encompasses an in-depth analysis of a cause and effect that is grounded in an interactive relationship between people and their environment in some way. Note, however, so the choice of the case or set of cases to study cannot appear random. Okay, evidence that supports the method by which you identified and chose your subject of analysis should be linked to the findings from the literature review. That's how important your literature review is. Be sure to cite any prior studies that help you determine that the case you chose was appropriate for the investigating the research problem. Okay, so that's for the methodology. So we now move on to discussion. Okay, so the main elements of your discussion section are generally the same as any research paper, but centered around interpreting and drawing conclusions about the key findings from your case study. Okay, so note that a general social science research paper, just like business administration, may contain a separate section to report findings. So you will need to begin with findings, and then we have the discussions, of course. However, in a paper designed around a case study, it is more common to combine a description of the findings with a discussion about their implications. Okay, so the objectives of your discussion section should include the following. So we have reiterate the research problem, state the major findings, explain the meaning of the findings and why, relate the findings to similar studies, consider alternative explanations of the findings, acknowledge the study's limitations, and suggest areas for further research. Okay, so let me start with the first. Reiterate the research problem or state the major findings. Okay, so here you will need to briefly reiterate the research problem you are investigating and explain why the subject of analysis around which you designed the case study was used. Okay, so you should then describe the findings revealed from your study of the case using direct, declarative, and succinct proclamation of the study results. Okay, highlight any findings that were unexpected or especially profound. Okay, so that's for the research problem and the statement of the major findings. Number two, explain the meaning of the findings and why they are important. Okay, and why they are important. So systematically explain the meaning of your case study findings and why you believe they are important. So begin this part of the section by repeating what you consider to be your most important or surprising finding first. Okay, so then systematically review each finding. Okay, so there must be some findings that really startled you or that really surprised you. So you will need to focus on them firstly and then work on the other details. So be sure to thoroughly extrapolate what your analysis of the case can tell the reader about the situations or conditions beyond the actual case that was studied, while at the same time being careful not to misconstrue, okay, or conflate a finding that undermines the external validity of your conclusions. Okay, so then we have relating the findings to similar studies. So this is where now the literature review comes in. So no study, okay, in business administration or other social sciences discipline is so novel or possesses such a restricted focus that it has no relation to previously published research. So it is important that you have to exhaust efforts in finding relevant and related material. So the discussion section should relate your case study results to those found in other studies, particularly if questions raised from prior studies serve as the motivation for choosing your subject of analysis. So this is important because comparing and contrasting the findings of other studies help to support the overall importance of your results, and it highlights how and in what ways your case study design and the subject of analysis differs from prior research about the topic. Okay, and then we now proceed to considering alternative explanations of the findings. Okay, so it is important to remember that the purpose of case study research in the business administration field is to discover and not to prove. Okay, so when writing the discussion section, you should carefully consider all, okay, all possible explanations for the case study results, rather than just those that fit your hypothesis or prior assumptions and biases. So be alert to what the in-depth analysis, okay, of the case may reveal about the research problem, including offering a contrarian perspective to what scholars have stated in prior research. So never fear to refute what other researchers in the past have believed in or have found in their research studies. Okay, so that's considering alternative explanations. Okay, and then acknowledge the study's limitations. Okay, acknowledge the study's limitations. So you can state the study's limitations in the conclusion section of your paper, but describing the limitations of your subject of analysis in the discussion section provides an opportunity to identify the limitations and explain why they are not significant. Okay, so this part of the discussion should also note any unanswered questions or issues your case could not address. Remember that it is only through the process of analyzing that you will realize, okay, that there are some aspects of the case that you cannot properly address or explain. Okay, so be sure that the recommendations for further research are linked to the research problem. Okay, and addressing the limitations, okay, that you declare or identify in the course of the analysis. So this part of the discussion section should also note any unanswered questions or issues your study could not address. So more detailed information about how to document any limitations to your research can be found in this particular section of the discussion. Also, you will need to suggest areas for further research, as I have mentioned earlier. So although your case studies may offer other important insights about the research problem, there are likely additional questions related to the problem that remain unanswered or findings that unexpectedly revealed themselves as a result of your in-depth analysis of the case. Okay, so you will need to have them, okay, recommended. Be sure that the recommendations for further research are linked to the research problem. Okay, and that you explain why your recommendations are valid in other contexts and based on original assumptions of your study. Okay, so that would be for the discussion part. So that will be for the sections on methodology and then discussions. Of course, you will need to have your conclusion part. Okay, so the conclusion, as with any research paper, you should summarize your conclusions in clear, simple language, emphasizing how the findings from your case study differ from or support prior research and why. Do not simply reiterate the discussion section, okay? Because you have it already, no, in the discussion part of the paper. Provide a synthesis, rather, okay, of the key findings, okay, presented in the paper to show how this converge to address, okay, so how would all these findings that you have, okay, converge to address the common problem. So if you haven't already done so in the discussion, be sure to document the limitations of your case study and needs for further research. Okay, so take note that the function of your paper's conclusion, okay, are as follows. Number one, restate the main argument supported by the findings from the analysis of your case. So it's a reiteration of the main premises that you have laid down for the basis of analyzing the case. Number two, clearly state the context, the background, the necessity of pursuing the research problem using a case study design about an issue, a controversy, or a gap found from reviewing the literature. Okay, so this will now appeal to what you have reviewed for related materials, and thereby giving it a frame for the conduct of the study by establishing the context, meaning the setting, okay, the background, okay, also the importance or urgency, okay, of pursuing the research problem, okay, and facilitated by a particular case study design. And then finally, provide a place for you to persuasively and succinctly restate the significance of your problem. So this is where now you highlight on what is the quintessence of your research problem. So given that the reader has now been presented with in-depth information about the topic. So these are the three. Okay. So we consider, okay, the following points to help ensure our conclusion is appropriate. Okay, so number one, okay, if argument or purpose of your paper is complex, you may need to summarize these points for your readers. So you need to have uh, a point by point, blow by blow. If in debate we have that account of the main points, okay, for the readers to be able, but not necessarily repeating everything or duplicating what you have in your discussion part. Okay, so if before your conclusion you have not explained the significance of your findings, or if you are proceeding inductively meaning from specific to general, okay, inductive, okay, use the conclusion of your paper to describe your main points and explain their significance. So move from a detailed to a general level of consideration of the case study's findings that returns the topic to the context provided by the introduction or within a new context that emerges from your case study findings. Okay. So note that, no, depending on the discipline, business administration, for example, you are writing in, and the preferences of your professor or your institution for that matter, the concluding paragraph may contain your final reflections on the evidence presented, okay, applied to practice, or on the essay's central research problem. So however, the nature of being introspective, now, about the subject of analysis you have investigated will depend on whether you are explicitly asked to express your observations in these ways. Okay? So also, in the course of writing your conclusion, there are some problems to avoid. Okay, for example, avoid over generalization. So one of the goals of a case study is to lay a foundation for understanding broader trends and issues applied to similar circumstances. So we are trying to look into something new or knowledge that may feed, okay, later on, okay, to other similar circumstances. So we're finding ways by which to understand other phenomenon, other event, other individuals, okay, other places, okay, by conducting a case analysis. Okay, so however, be careful when concluding your case study. They must be evidence-based and grounded in the results of the study. Otherwise, it is merely a speculation. Okay, that's why a case study is an in-depth investigation or requires in-depth investigation. Okay, so for example, okay, we may be dealing with anecdotal records, but it has to be validated. Okay, it should not only be based on the account of the persons that have second hand experience on the second hand, meaning the account was from someone who has witnessed the actual event or the phenomenon, okay, or the person himself, but okay, but is only a second, okay. The first-hand information was handed down to another. Okay, so uh, you will need to conduct further research and in order for you to be able to have definitive finding, okay, so you need to gather additional data. Also, something to avoid is the failure to document limitations. Okay, so no case is going to reveal all the needs to be understood about a research problem. Take note, okay, you cannot have it all. Therefore, just as you have to clearly state the limitations of a general research study, you must describe the specific limitations inherent in the subject of analysis. Okay, so you will need to properly and explicitly discuss or account for the limitations. Also, avoid failure to extrapolate all possible implications. So just as you don't want to overgeneralize from your case study findings, you also have to be thorough in the consideration of all possible outcomes or recommendations derived from your findings. If you do not, okay, your reader may question the validity of your analysis. So particularly if you fail to document an obvious outcome from your case study research. Okay, so that's how important it is. Okay, so that will be to cap our discussion about conclusion. This and now in my last slide for the second part of the writing of case study report discussion. Okay, this time I will be focusing on some misconceptions about writing. Okay, so writing tip misconceptions. So there are at least 5 that I can identify for you about misconceptions regarding case study research. So social science case studies, okay, business administration part of social science are often perceived as limited in their ability to create new knowledge because they are not randomly selected and findings cannot be generalized to a larger population. Okay, so here are 5 misunderstandings about case study research and systematically corrects each one. Okay, so number 1, general, theoretical, okay. Context-independent knowledge is more valuable than concrete, practical, or context-dependent knowledge. Okay, so that is one of the misunderstandings. Number 2, one cannot generalize based on an individual case. Therefore, the case study cannot contribute to scientific development. Okay, this is another misunderstanding. Number 3, the case study is most useful for generating hypotheses. That is in the first stage of the total research process, whereas other methods are most suitable for hypothesis testing and theory building. Number 4, the case study contains a bias toward verification, that is a tendency to confirm the researcher's preconceived notions. And finally, it is often difficult to summarize and develop general propositions and theories based on specific case studies. So if you will reckon it with my previous discussions about case study research writing, okay, all these are misconceptions. Okay, so while writing your paper, okay, you will need to think introspectively about how you address these misconceptions, because to do so can help you strengthen the validity and reliability of your research. And that is done by clarifying the issues of case selection, the testing, the challenging of the existing assumptions, the interpretation of key findings, and the summation of case outcomes. So think of a case study research paper as a complete, in-depth narrative about the specific properties and key characteristics of your subjects of analysis, applied to the research problem. Okay, so the next slide will be the references, and I give highlight to the work of Flive Jerg, okay, on the misunderstandings about case study research and others. Okay, so that will be the concluding part of the report on case study report writing. Thank you, everyone.